You think working a few extra hours is a problem? We call that passion here. Those were the last words my CEO, Travis Langford, threw at me during a closed-door meeting at 9 p.m. 3 months later, he lost his position. The company was under federal investigation, and I was moving to the Colorado mountains with $500,000 in my account. My name is Rachel Donnelly, and at 34, I thought I had my life figured out. Louisville, Kentucky wasn't the tech hub of America, but it was home. A place where the bourbon flowed as freely as the Ohio River, and where you could still buy a decent house without selling your soul. I'd worked my way up to project manager at Lyric Systems, a mid-sized company that specialized in data analytics software for healthcare corporations. It wasn't Google or Apple, but it paid well enough for me to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in the Highlands neighborhood and still have money left over for my mother's medical bills. The morning everything changed started like any other. My golden retriever, Murphy, woke me at 6 a.m. with his usual enthusiasm, his tail wagging against my nightstand like a furry metronome. I made coffee in my French press, a small luxury I allowed myself, and checked my phone for overnight emails. There were 17. I sighed, remembering when this job used to excite me. Back when work-life balance was more than just corporate buzzwords on our website. I'd been with Lyrics for 6 years, joining right after finishing my MBA at University of Louisville. Back then, it was a different company. Our founder, an old-school engineer named Robert Chen, believed in treating employees like human beings. We had flexible hours, generous PTO, and a culture that understood people had lives outside the office. When someone's kid got sick or their parent needed care, nobody batted an eye if they worked from home or adjusted their schedule. That culture was why I'd turned down offers from bigger companies. Sure, I could have made 20% more at a firm in San Francisco or New York. But what good is money if you're too burned out to enjoy it? Besides, Mom needed me here. After Dad passed 5 years ago, her heart condition had worsened. Nothing critical, her cardiologist assured me she had many good years left. But she needed someone to drive her to appointments, help with grocery shopping, and just be there when the loneliness crept in. I lived 15 minutes from her house in St. Barres, Matthews, close enough to stop by most evenings but far enough to maintain my independence. It was a balance I'd carefully constructed, like one of the project timelines I meticulously crafted at work. Every piece had its place, 40 to 45 hours at the office, evenings with Mom or Murphy, weekends for hiking in Cherokee Park, or catching up with friends at the local brewery. At Lyrics, I managed a team of 8 developers and designers working on our flagship product, MedInsight. It was sophisticated software that helped hospitals analyze patient data to improve care outcomes while maintaining HIPAA compliance. I believed in what we did. We weren't just pushing pixels or optimizing ad clicks. We were genuinely helping healthcare providers serve their patients better. My team respected me because I respected them. I knew their kids' names, remembered their anniversaries, and never scheduled meetings during lunch unless absolutely necessary. When Tim's wife had complications during pregnancy, I quietly redistributed his workload so he could be at the hospital without worrying about deadlines. When Sarah's daughter made the state championship softball team, I made sure she could leave early for every game. This wasn't just being nice, it was smart management. Happy employees are productive employees. My team consistently delivered projects on time and under budget. Our client satisfaction scores were the highest in the company. I'd even won the company's leadership award 2 years running, complete with a glass plaque that now served as a very expensive coaster on my desk. But I should have seen the signs of change coming. The tech industry had been shifting, venture capital drying up, and companies everywhere were tightening their belts. Still, Lyrics seemed stable. We had solid contracts, good cash flow, and a reputation for reliability in an industry full of vaporware and broken promises. I dressed that morning in my usual uniform, dark jeans, a burgundy blouse, and the comfortable flats that had seen me through countless office floors. Professional but practical. I'd learned long ago that nobody took you more seriously because you tortured yourself in heels. After giving Murphy his breakfast and a proper goodbye scratch behind the ears, I drove to the office, NPR playing softly on the radio, completely unaware that in 6 months, everything I'd built would come crashing down around me. The acquisition happened on a Tuesday. I remember because I'd just finished presenting our quarterly roadmap when Robert called an all-hands meeting. The conference room buzzed with nervous energy as 200 employees crammed in, overflow watching from their laptops. Robert stood at the front, his usual easy smile replaced by something forced and brittle. "I have exciting news," he began, though his voice suggested otherwise. Apex Venture Partners has acquired a majority stake in Lyric Systems. This investment will help us scale operations and compete more effectively in the healthcare analytics market. The words hit like ice water. Apex had a reputation. They bought promising companies, squeezed them for profits, and left behind hollow shells. I caught my teammate David's eye across the room. His expression mirrored my dread. "Leadership changes are part of growth," Robert continued, each word seemingly pulled from him. "I'll be transitioning to an advisory role. Travis Langford, formerly of Apex's portfolio companies, will serve as our new CEO." Travis Langford stepped forward like he was accepting an Academy Award. Mid-40s, sharp suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and a smile that never reached his eyes. He had that venture capital look, the kind of guy who read The 4-Hour Work Week and decided everyone else should work the other 164. "Thrilled to be here," Travis said, his voice carrying that artificial enthusiasm I'd heard too many times at tech conferences. "Lyrics has incredible potential. With some operational improvements and a renewed focus on performance, we'll dominate this market." Operational improvements, performance focus, corporate speak for prepare to have your life destroyed. The changes started immediately. First came the efficiency audit. Consultants in identical suits invaded our offices, timing our bathroom breaks, documenting our lunch durations, analyzing our email response times. They interviewed each of us, asking questions like, "How many hours would you say you're truly productive each day?" And, "Would you describe the culture here as driven or comfortable?" Then came the new policies. Flexible hours, gone. Everyone needed to be in the office by 8 a.m. sharp. Working from home, eliminated, except for documented emergencies. The free snacks disappeared, replaced by vending machines. The monthly team lunches became quarterly working sessions where we ate soggy sandwiches while reviewing KPIs. But the real blow came during week 3 of the new regime. Travis called a meeting with all project managers. There were 12 of us, each running different product lines or client accounts. We gathered in the executive conference room, the one with the glass walls that made you feel like a zoo exhibit. "Let's talk about commitment," Travis began, pacing like a caged predator. "Our competitors work harder than us. Their teams put in 60, 70, even 80-hour weeks. Meanwhile, I see parking lots empty by 6 p.m. I see people taking full lunch breaks. I see," he paused, looking directly at me, "people leaving early for personal appointments." My stomach clenched. The previous week, I'd left at 4:30 to take Mom to her cardiologist. I'd cleared it with HR, finished all my deliverables, and my team was ahead of schedule. But none of that mattered to Travis. Effective immediately, I expect all leadership to model true dedication, minimum 60 hours per week in the office, visible presence, set the example. He smiled that shark smile. "Those who can't commit to excellence should reconsider their futures here." Janet from the platform team raised her hand. "What about work-life balance? Many of us have families, obligations." "Work-life balance is a luxury for companies that are happy with mediocrity." Travis cut her off. "We're building something exceptional here. That requires exceptional commitment." I thought about Mom, about Murphy, about the life I'd carefully constructed. "What about our existing contracts?" I asked. "They specify 40-hour work weeks." Travis's eyes narrowed. "Contracts can be renegotiated. Consider the extra hours and investment in your career. Unless," he paused, "you're not interested in having a career here." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Around the table, My colleagues shifted uncomfortably. We all had mortgages, families, responsibilities. In a city like Louisville, tech jobs at our level weren't exactly growing on trees. Over the following weeks, the pressure intensified. Travis instituted daily 7 a.m. stand-ups, mandatory evening innovation sessions, and weekend strategic planning workshops. The official policy might have said 60 hours, but the reality pushed closer to 80. My team started cracking. Tim missed his daughter's first steps. Sarah's son asked why mommy never came to bedtime anymore. The break came on a Thursday night at 9 p.m. I was still at the office, trying to finish a proposal that Travis had demanded by morning. A proposal he'd known about for weeks, but only assigned that afternoon. Mom had called twice. Murphy was at doggy daycare, probably wondering if I'd abandoned him. I was exhausted, frustrated, and when Travis appeared at my desk, I'd reached my limit. Still here, Donnelly. Good to see some dedication finally. I've been here since 7 a.m., I said, not looking up from my screen. And you'll be here until the job's done. That's what leaders do. Something snapped. I turned to face him. My mother has a heart condition. I have responsibilities outside this office. His expression hardened. You think working a few extra hours is a problem? We call that passion here. He leaned closer, voice dropping. Maybe you should consider whether you have what it takes. Some people are assets, others are liabilities. Which are you? The word hung between us. Liability. After 6 years of exceptional reviews, successful projects, and loyal clients, I was a liability because I wanted to work 50 hours instead of 80. Get that proposal done, he said, walking away. Or don't bother coming in tomorrow. I stared at my screen, hands trembling with rage. Around me, the office hummed with the desperate energy of people trying to save their jobs by sacrificing their lives. This wasn't what I'd signed up for. This wasn't what any of us had built. But I'd underestimated Travis Langford. He wasn't just here to squeeze profits. He was here to break us down and rebuild us in his image. What he didn't know was that some of us don't break. We shatter, and then we become something sharper. The next morning, I arrived at 6:45 a.m. with my proposal printed and bound. Travis wasn't even there yet. I left it on his desk and went to my cubicle, expecting some acknowledgement, maybe even grudging approval. Instead, at the 7 a.m. stand-up, he announced a reorganization to optimize resource allocation. Rachel Donnelly will be transitioning to lead our legacy systems documentation project, he said, not even looking at me. It's a critical initiative for our compliance requirements. My colleagues avoided eye contact. Everyone knew what legacy systems documentation meant. It was corporate Siberia. A made-up project where difficult employees were sent to wither away until they quit. No budget, no team, no real deliverables. Just endless documentation of systems we'd decommissioned years ago. Janet will be taking over MedInsight. Travis continued. Janet, who'd been hired 3 weeks ago from one of Apex's other portfolio companies, who'd never worked in healthcare tech, who called me Rebecca half the time. I was moved to a corner cube in the basement next to the server room. The constant hum of cooling fans became my only companion. My team wasn't allowed to contact me directly. All communication had to go through Janet. My access to current projects was revoked. Even my email signature was changed to remove my title, leaving just my name and legacy documentation specialist. The first week, I raged. I drafted resignation letters, plotted dramatic exits, imagined telling Travis exactly what I thought of him in front of the entire company. But each night, I'd go home to Mom's worried face, to bills that needed paying, to the harsh reality that I couldn't afford to quit without another job lined up. The second week, despair set in. I'd spend hours staring at obsolete system diagrams, writing documentation no one would ever read. My passwords still worked for most internal systems. I was notoriously slow at revoking access. But what was the point? I was professionally dead, just waiting for Travis to find an excuse to finish me off. It was during the third week that everything changed. Boredom led me to actually read some of the old documentation I was supposedly updating. financial reports from 3 years ago, contract templates, vendor agreements. And that's when I noticed the patterns. A consulting fee here, a software license there, names of companies I'd never heard of, charging amounts that made no sense. Apex venture partners appeared frequently, along with shell companies that, with a bit of Googling, traced back to Apex executives. Curiosity replaced despair. I started digging deeper, using my lingering system access to pull more recent records. The pattern continued, accelerating after the acquisition. Inflated invoices for services never rendered. Licensing fees for software we didn't use. Consulting contracts with companies that seemed to exist only on paper. But it was the API documentation that made my blood run cold. Hidden in the technical specifications for our latest MedInsight update was something that shouldn't have been there. A data collection protocol that far exceeded our stated privacy policy. We weren't just analyzing anonymous healthcare data. We were collecting identifiable patient information, social security numbers, insurance details, medical histories. The kind of data that, in the wrong hands, would be worth millions on the dark web. I cross-referenced with our client contracts. Every single one explicitly forbade this kind of data collection. We were in violation of high PA, state privacy laws, and our own terms of service. The liability wasn't just financial, people could go to prison for this. My hands shook as I took photos of my screen with my personal phone. Screenshots could be traced, but pictures? Those were harder to track. I spent the next weeks methodically documenting everything. Financial irregularities, privacy violations, fraudulent billing. I stayed late, claiming dedication to my meaningless project, while building a comprehensive case file. The smoking gun came in an email thread I shouldn't have been able to access. Travis, discussing with Apex's CFO how to maximize data asset value before the next audit. They knew. They didn't care. They were planning to strip mine our clients' data and disappear before anyone noticed. I found myself thinking about Robert, our founder, who'd built this company to help healthcare providers, about my team, who believed they were making a difference, about the millions of patients whose most intimate medical details were being packaged for sale. That night, I sat in my basement cube, the server fans humming their monotonous song, and I made a decision. Travis had called me a liability. He had no idea how right he was about to be. I opened a new browser window, cleared my cache, and navigated to the Federal Trade Commission's whistleblower portal. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Once I did this, there was no going back. But then I thought about Travis's smug face, about Janet fumbling through my projects, about good people forced to choose between their jobs and their lives. I began typing. I am an employee of Lyric Systems in Louisville, Kentucky. I have documented evidence of systematic fraud, illegal data collection, and privacy violations that put millions of patients at risk. The following information details. The server fans hummed approval as I worked through the night, organizing evidence, preparing files, building the case that would bring Travis Langford's empire crashing down. He tried to bury me in the basement with obsolete systems and forgotten documentation. He'd forgotten that sometimes. The most dangerous things are found in the dark. The FTC submission was just the beginning. Over the next 2 months, I became a ghost in my own workplace, invisible but omnipresent. While Travis and his executive team focused on squeezing more hours from their visible employees, I meticulously built my case in the shadows of the basement. My first move was securing evidence. Every document, every email, every line of suspicious code needed to be preserved without triggering the IT department's monitoring systems. I developed a routine: arrive early, download files to encrypted USB drives I'd hidden in tampon boxes in my desk drawer, the one place male IT staff would never search. During lunch, I'd walk to the public library 6 blocks away and upload everything to secure cloud storage using their computers. The financial fraud was extensive, but proving it required expertise beyond my MBA training. That's when I reached out to Janice Halber, a whistleblower attorney whose name I'd found in a Department of Justice press release. She'd successfully represented employees who'd exposed Medicare fraud, winning multi-million-dollar settlements. Our first meeting was at a Starbucks in Indiana, 40 minutes from Louisville, far enough that I wouldn't run into colleagues. "This is bigger than typical corporate theft," Janice said after reviewing my initial documentation. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, but her eyes sparked with interest. "The data privacy violations alone could trigger criminal charges. The FBI might get involved." "Good," I said, surprising myself with the venom in my voice. She studied me over her coffee. "Whistleblowing isn't about revenge, Rachel. It's about justice." "Can't it be both?" A small smile crossed her lips. "In my experience, the best cases usually are." Janice taught me how to document properly: times, dates, participants, context. She showed me how to create chains of evidence that would hold up in court. Most importantly, she connected me with a forensic accountant who could decipher the complex web of shell companies Apex had woven around lyrics. But I needed more than financial evidence. I needed Travis to explicitly acknowledge the illegal activities. That's where my invisibility became an asset. Nobody pays attention to the woman in the basement documenting dead systems. I started timing my evening work to coincide with Travis's late-night strategy sessions. The executive conference room was directly above my cube, and the building's old ventilation system carried voices better than any wiretap. I heard them planning to inflate usage statistics for our hospital clients, charging for phantom users. I heard them discussing which board members to keep in the dark. I heard Travis laugh about those idiots in compliance who actually believed the privacy policies mattered. The breakthrough came when I remembered something from my years managing MedInsight. I still had administrative access to the system's debug logs. These logs recorded every action, every data query, every modification. Travis didn't know they existed because he'd never bothered to understand our actual technology. But I knew. And what I found there was damning. Unauthorized data exports. Massive queries pulling patient information. API calls to IP addresses registered to data brokers. All time-stamped, all traceable to specific user accounts, including Travis's own login credentials. The masterstroke came in week 7 of my basement exile. Travis sent an email asking all department heads to verify our client data handling procedures, a routine compliance check from our biggest hospital client. He needed responses showing we were following all privacy protocols. The irony was delicious. I crafted my response carefully. I confirmed our official policies, quoted our contracts, cited HIPAA regulations. Then I added one line. "However, recent system modifications may require additional review to ensure continued compliance." It was bait, subtle but effective. Within an hour, Travis was at my desk. "What system modifications?" he demanded. I pulled up the API documentation on my screen, the same one showing the illegal data collection. "I noticed these during my documentation review. I assumed they were approved changes." His face went through several expressions: surprise, calculation, decision. "Those are strategic enhancements, nothing that affects compliance." "Should I document them as such?" I asked innocently. "Yes. Note that I've personally reviewed and approved all system modifications as fully compliant." He straightened his tie. "Send me that documentation when you're done." I sent it within the hour, CCing my personal email by accident. His written confirmation that he'd approved the illegal data collection was now preserved in multiple locations. That night, I packaged everything: financial records showing $3.2 million in fraudulent transactions, technical documentation proving systematic privacy violations affecting over 800,000 patients, email threads discussing the cover-up. And now, Travis's own written admission. Janice filed the complaint with the FTC, the Department of Justice, and the Department of Health and Human Services simultaneously. She also initiated a Kai Tom lawsuit under the False Claims Act, a provision that allows whistleblowers to sue on behalf of the government and receive a percentage of recovered funds. "Now we wait," she told me. "Keep your head down, do nothing different. Let them think you're still their broken employee in the basement." So I waited. Every morning, I'd drive to work, descend to my basement cube, and pretend to document systems that no longer existed. I'd watched Travis stride through the offices, barking orders, demanding more hours, more sacrifice, more devotion to his vision of success. He had no idea that 6 floors above his head, federal investigators were already reviewing the evidence I'd provided. He didn't know that his empire was built on sand, and I'd just opened the floodgates. Patience, I learned, is the most exquisite form of revenge. Every condescending email, every ignored request. Every day in that basement was another twist of the knife he didn't even know was buried in his back. Travis Langford thought he'd destroyed my career. In reality, he'd just given me the time and motivation to destroy his. The first sign something was wrong came on a Wednesday morning. I arrived at my usual 7 a.m. to find the parking lot buzzing with unfamiliar vehicles. Black SUVs with government plates. Men and women in dark suits carrying bankers' boxes into our building. The FBI doesn't do subtle. I parked in my usual spot and walked in as if nothing was unusual. Badge beeping at the scanner like any other day. But inside, the atmosphere was electric. Employees clustered in nervous groups, whispering. The executive floor was sealed off with yellow tape. Through the glass walls, I could see agents methodically packing computers and files. All hands meeting in 10 minutes, someone said. Mandatory. We gathered in the main conference room, 300 confused and frightened people. Travis stood at the front, but he looked different. The swagger was gone, replaced by something brittle. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tie askew. Beside him stood a woman I'd never seen before, severe suit, FBI credentials visible on her belt. There's been a development, Travis began, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. Federal authorities are conducting a routine audit of our systems. It's nothing to be concerned about. We're cooperating fully. The FBI agent stepped forward. I'm Special Agent Martinez. We'll need to interview certain employees over the coming days. You'll be contacted individually. Do not destroy any documents, delete any files, or discuss this investigation outside these walls. Continue your normal duties unless instructed otherwise. Normal duties? I almost laughed. In my basement cube, I opened my laptop and pretended to work on documentation nobody would ever read. But I kept my door cracked, listening to the footsteps above, the muffled conversations, the sound of a castle crumbling. By noon, the whispers had become roars. Someone in accounting had overheard agents discussing fraud charges. It reported that all servers had been imaged for evidence. The words data breach and HIPAA violations spread like wildfire through Slack channels before IT shut down our internal communications entirely. Local news picked up the story by evening. Federal agents raid Louisville tech company. I watched from my apartment. Murphy curled beside me as reporters stood outside our building speculating about the investigation. They didn't have details yet, but they would soon. The next morning, Travis wasn't there. Neither was the CFO or half the executive team. Janet, my replacement, was frantically trying to manage MedInsight with no idea how the system actually worked. Clients were calling, demanding answers about their data security. She forwarded them to me, of all people, begging for help. I helped, of course, not for her or Travis, but for my team, my old clients, the people who'd trusted us with their data. I wrote careful responses, truthful but measured, assuring them that their systems were secure while acknowledging the ongoing investigation. Day 3 brought the media storm. Someone, definitely not me. Janice had been very clear about protecting my identity, had leaked details to TechCrunch. The headline read, Healthcare software company under federal investigation for massive data privacy violations. The article detailed the alleged sale of patient data, the fraudulent billing, the systematic deception of hospital clients. Our stock price plummeted 40% in pre-market trading. Clients began terminating contracts. Employees started updating their LinkedIn profiles. The implosion was swift and merciless. Friday arrived with another mandatory meeting. This time, the speaker was someone from Apex Venture Partners, a damage control specialist with dead eyes and a practiced smile. Travis, he informed us, had stepped down to focus on the investigation. The board was evaluating leadership options. The company remained committed to transparency and compliance. Corporate speak for "we're fucked" and "we're looking for someone to blame." I learned the full scope from Janice during a weekend call. The FBI had found everything: the shell companies, the data sales, the fraudulent billing. But more importantly, they'd found Travis's communications explicitly directing the illegal activities. My carefully planted email trail had given them a roadmap straight to criminal charges. "The FTC is preparing a massive fine," Janice told me. "DOJ is pursuing criminal charges against Travis and 3 other executives. And the False Claims Act lawsuit, the government's intervening, which means they think the case is solid." What does that mean for me? If they recover funds, and they will, you're entitled to 15 to 30% as the whistleblower. Based on the scope of fraud, you're looking at a substantial reward. Substantial. Such a clinical word for justice. Monday brought Travis's perp walk. I watched from my basement cube as news sites streamed video of him being led from his Prospect mansion in handcuffs. His lawyer made a statement about fighting these baseless charges. But the damage was done. The man who'd demanded we sacrifice everything for his vision was now facing 20 years in federal prison. The local news interview with a data privacy expert was particularly satisfying. "This is one of the largest healthcare data breaches we've seen," she said. "The systematic nature, the deliberate deception, it's unconscionable. Whoever exposed this deserves a medal." A medal. I looked around my basement cube, at the meaningless documentation I'd pretended to create for months, at the career Travis had tried to destroy. I didn't need a medal. I had something better. Within a week, Lyric Systems was in full crisis mode. The board fired the entire executive team. Robert, our original founder, was brought back as interim CEO, looking older and sadder than I remembered. Class action lawsuits poured in from affected patients. Our biggest clients canceled their contracts. The company that Travis had tried to transform into a profit machine was hemorrhaging money and reputation. But in the basement, I kept working, documenting systems nobody cared about, watching an empire fall, waiting for the final piece of my revenge to click into place. Because while everyone focused on Travis's crimes, on the FBI raid, on the corporate drama playing out in the headlines, they missed the most important detail. The investigation was just beginning. The fraud ran deeper than anyone imagined, and I had documented every single thread of the web. Travis thought he'd buried me in the basement with obsolete code and forgotten projects. Instead, he'd given me the perfect vantage point to watch his world burn. And the fire was just getting started. The settlement came 6 months later. I was in my kitchen, making coffee for Mom who'd stayed the night after a minor procedure, when Janice called. "Sit down," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "How much?" "The government recovered $11 million in fraudulent billing and fines. Your share, after legal fees, is $500,000. The mug slipped from my hand, shattering on the tile floor. Mom rushed in, worried, but I was laughing, really laughing, for the first time in almost a year. The DOJ's final report was damning. $3 million in fraudulent billing to Medicare and Medicaid, $8 million in fines for HIPAA violations affecting 847,000 patients. Travis personally faced criminal charges for wire fraud, conspiracy, and violations of federal healthcare laws. His trial was set for the following year. The other executives cut plea deals, testifying against him in exchange for reduced sentences, but the money was just part of it. Under whistleblower protection laws, Lyrics couldn't touch me. I was technically still employed, still collecting my salary, still sitting in my basement cube pretending to document dead systems. The irony was exquisite. They were paying me to exist as living proof of their crimes. Robert, reinstated as CEO, tried to salvage what was left. He called me to his office on a Tuesday afternoon, the first time I'd been on the executive floor since Travis's regime began. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "I should have protected the company better. Protected you all better." I studied him. This man who'd built something good and watched it get perverted by greed. What happens now? We're restructuring, going back to our roots, smaller, leaner, but ethical. He paused. I'd like you to come back, lead MedInsight again, help us rebuild. The offer was tempting. My team, the ones who'd survived, would need leadership. The product I'd helped build could still help people. But sitting there, I realized something. I was done. Done with corporate politics. Done with fighting for work-life balance. Done with proving my worth to people who saw humans as resources to be optimized. I appreciate the offer, I said. But I think it's time for me to move on. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. The board authorized a severance package, 2 years' salary, full benefits extension, and will vest your remaining stock options immediately. Even broken and bleeding money, Robert was trying to do right. I accepted, signed the papers, and walked out of Lyric Systems for the last time. The FBI interviews had been thorough but protective. My identity as the whistleblower was sealed under federal law. To everyone except Janice, Robert, and a handful of federal agents, I was just another employee caught in the scandal. Some suspected, former colleagues gave me knowing looks, and Janet had apologized profusely for taking my job, but nobody knew for certain. Travis's assets were frozen pending trial. His house in Prospect went on the market. His Tesla was repossessed. The financial press delighted in documenting his fall from venture capital, darling to federal defendant. He'd wanted to be remembered. He got his wish, just not how he'd imagined. I used my severance time to plan. The $500,000, combined with my savings and the severance package, gave me options I'd never had before. Mom's medical bills were paid off. Murphy got the expensive surgery the vet had recommended for his hip dysplasia. I bought a small cabin in the mountains outside Boulder, Colorado, close enough to civilization for internet and groceries, far enough for real peace. The move was surprisingly easy. I donated most of my professional wardrobe to Dress for Success, keeping only jeans and hiking boots. My awards and certificates went in the trash. The glass plaque naming me Employee of the Year made a satisfying crack when it hit the bottom of the dumpster. Mom worried, of course. You're only 34, she said. You can't just retire. But I wasn't retiring. I was transitioning. In Colorado, I started consulting, remotely, part-time, on my terms, 20 hours a week maximum, helping small healthcare startups build ethical data systems. I charged enough to live comfortably, but not so much that clients expected me to sacrifice my life for their deadlines. Evenings were for hiking with Murphy, now moving easier thanks to his surgery. Weekends were for learning pottery at the local community center, reading books that had nothing to do with corporate strategy, remembering who I was before PowerPoints and KPIs consumed my identity. The news of Travis's conviction came while I was on a mountain trail. 23 months in federal prison, 5 years probation, and a lifetime ban from serving as an officer in any public company. His lawyer called it a miscarriage of justice. The judge called it lenient given the scope of harm. I sat on a rock overlooking the valley, Murphy panting beside me, and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just a curious emptiness. The revenge I'd orchestrated so carefully seemed distant now, like something that had happened to someone else. That night, I called Mom. I think I'm done being angry, I told her. Good, she said. Anger's useful sometimes, but it's a terrible roommate. She was right. For months, anger had driven me, sustained me through those basement days, fueled my meticulous documentation. But now, with Travis in prison and my bank account full, the anger had nowhere to go. So I let it dissipate like morning mist over the mountains. I donated $50,000 to a healthcare data privacy advocacy group. Another $50,000 went to a scholarship fund for first-generation college students in Louisville. The rest stayed invested, growing quietly while I built a life that no CEO could ever take away. Because that was the real revenge, not the money or the conviction or the headlines. It was this: waking up when my body was ready, Not when an alarm demanded. Working on projects I believed in for people who respected boundaries. Living in a place where the only metrics that mattered were how many stars I could see at night and how tired Murphy was after our daily adventures. Travis had preached the gospel of endless growth, of sacrificing everything for success. He'd tried to break me for refusing to worship at that altar. Instead, he'd freed me from it entirely. 3 years have passed since I left Louisville. The cabin in Colorado has become home in ways my city apartment never was. I added a greenhouse where I grow tomatoes and herbs, built a workshop where I restore old furniture, and created a life measured in moments rather than metrics. The tech world moved on quickly, as it always does. Lyric Systems survived but never recovered its former prominence. Robert managed to sell it to a larger healthcare company that absorbed the technology and dissolved the brand. Most of my former colleagues scattered to other companies, carrying stories of the spectacular implosion they'd witnessed. Some reached out, curious about my abrupt disappearance. I told them I'd burned out and changed careers. It wasn't even a lie. Travis served 18 months of his sentence, time off for good behavior and minimum security privileges. The tech press ran a "Where are they now?" piece last month. He's apparently working as a transformation consultant, helping companies optimize their human capital. The hustle never stops, even after federal prison. I laughed when I read it, but it was a clean laugh, free of bitterness. Janice and I exchanged Christmas cards. She sent a photo last year of herself on a boat she'd named Justice Served. She's helped dozens of other whistleblowers since my case, building a practice on protecting those who dare to speak truth to power. Sometimes she asks if I'd consider speaking at conferences about corporate ethics and whistleblower protection. I always decline. That chapter is closed. Mom visits every few months, marveling at the mountain views and fussing over my hermit lifestyle. But she sees what the corporate world never did, that I'm happy. Really, genuinely happy. Her heart condition has stabilized, and she's taken up watercolor painting. We hike easy trails together. Murphy leading the way with graying muzzle and endless enthusiasm. The consulting work keeps my skills sharp without consuming my life. I've helped 12 small healthcare companies build ethical data systems. My contracts include a clause I call the Travis Prevention Protocol. Any client who asks me to work more than 20 hours a week loses my services immediately. So far, no one has tested it. Word spreads in small communities, and I've become known as the consultant who delivers excellent work on human terms. Last week, I received an unexpected email. One of my former team members, Tim, had started his own company. He wanted my advice on building a sustainable culture from day one. I keep thinking about how things went wrong at Lyrics, he wrote. I want to build something different. We talked for hours. I shared what I'd learned about the warning signs, the creeping scope, the glamorization of overwork, the moment when passion becomes a weapon against boundaries. He took notes, asked questions, and thanked me for wisdom I'd earned the hard way. When he offered me equity to join as a part-time advisor, I accepted. Not for the potential payout, but for the chance to help build something ethical from the ground up. The $500,000 whistleblower award still sits mostly untouched, growing in index funds. I don't need it for daily life. The consulting and severance covered that. Instead, it's become my freedom fund, proof that I'll never again be trapped by financial necessity in a job that demands my soul. There's power in knowing you can walk away, real power that no title or corner office can match. Sometimes, on clear mornings when the mountains glow pink with sunrise, I think about that night in the Lyrics basement. Travis standing over me, sneering about passion and liability. He'd meant to break me, to demonstrate what happened to people who refused to sacrifice their lives for his vision. Instead, he'd handed me the keys to his destruction and, more importantly, to my liberation. I used to think revenge meant watching your enemy fall. Now I understand it differently. True revenge is building a life so good that the enemy becomes irrelevant. It's waking up without dread, working without exhaustion, existing without justifying your worth through productivity metrics. It's choosing Tuesday afternoon naps with your dog over Tuesday afternoon status meetings. It's measuring success in laughter, sunsets, and the number of days since you last checked corporate email. The investigative journalists were wrong about one thing. They'd written about a heroic whistleblower who'd sacrificed everything to expose corruption. But I hadn't sacrificed anything that mattered. I'd traded a cage for mountains, meetings for meaning, a boss's approval for my own peace. If that's sacrifice, I recommend it highly. Murphy's getting older now, moving slower on our hikes. I've started looking at rescue puppies, thinking about giving another dog the freedom I found here. There's a shepherd mix at the local shelter with eyes that remind me of my own that night in the basement. Wary but unbroken. I think I'll visit him tomorrow. Because that's what we do with our freedom. We extend it to others. We build lives that prove another way is possible. We show that success doesn't require suffering, that passion doesn't mean self-destruction, that work can be part of life without becoming life itself. Travis told me I was a liability. He was right. I was a liability to a system that confused exploitation with excellence. And in the end, that liability paid off in ways he never imagined, not just in dollars, but in the immeasurable wealth of a life lived on my own terms. I didn't spend that $500,000 on revenge. I spent it on freedom. And freedom, I've learned, is the best revenge of all. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're hearing this. Drop a comment and let me know what city or country you're from so we can connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts about work-life balance, standing up to toxic bosses, or finding your own version of freedom. Your stories inspire me to keep sharing these experiences.